Welcome to the House of Azor podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing a movie that goes by many a name. The current name is Deadly Games, and that is the name, if you're looking on Shudder, the streaming service. It is Deadly Games, and it's had multiple other names. Because what was it? It was Hide and Freak.
Hide and Freak, which I hadn't heard that before. And then Dial Code Santa, which is a good name if you have context. Maybe if you lived in France in that era. And then Game Over is what it's known for on IMDb.
And then there's plenty of other names too, because just looking at IMDb, it's also known as 36.15 Code Pere Noel. A lot of titles for it. So, like I said, right now you can watch it on the streaming service Shudder. And I know it's screened at some like festivals in the U.S., like Fantastic Fest or something.
Like last year, I think. This time last year is when it premiered in the U.S. Finally.
And the key thing to take away from this was it's a 1989 released film that was directed by Renee Manzor. And this was a movie that has had a little bit of conversation. Like it had not been really shown in the U.S. legally until those initial screenings in the past year or so. And then its first legal way you can watch it as a consumer
at home
is on Shudder. Now there could have been import disc or something you could maybe.
I think there may have been a French import disc, but that was fairly recently as well. They said people had bootleg VHS tapes basically.
So there's all of that like background on it. So if you want to watch it, it's on Shudder. I'm not really sure if there's other venues to get this, but.
I think they bought the U.S. rights, I believe.
Yeah.
At least right now. I mean, probably limited time until they release it on disc or something.
And but the key thing to take away from this movie is, so it is a young boy who is in his home and his mother is so the basic premise, the majority of the film, the mom is at work. A deranged killer dressed as Santa Claus comes to the house and tries to break in and kill him and his dog and his grandfather, and he has to use his wits and some booby traps to try to keep that from happening.
So Home Alone.
So that is where the controversy or the legal stuff came in around it, where after seeing Home Alone, the director of this film, they tried to sue them for plagiarism, for taking too much of the story elements and all that. And I don't think that lawsuit went anywhere because Home Alone, so this movie came out in 1989. Home Alone came out in 1990.
But Home Alone had been floating around for a while, so...
but there's not, because one, there was no lawsuit that the studio lost with Home Alone, so they're not going to go preemptively put all this stuff out there. It's like, I don't care. There's, this movie nobody's ever heard of, tried to sue us and lost, and nothing went anywhere.
I wonder if, for some reason, that lawsuit, I don't know when that lawsuit happened, if that was at all the reason why it got kind of shut out by America. Like if all the big distributors were like, oh, he tried to come for,
one of our brethren,
this John Hughes production and stuff. Like, okay, well, you know what? You don't get any, American distribution. Well, we don't know.
But I mean, I think part of it is just that era, foreign film did not find its way to America very easily. It was pretty rare. Like
Blockbuster probably did not want to buy a bunch of these.
Yeah, because you had some of the BBC stuff or, Wallace and Gromit or stuff that originated in Europe and England. Yeah. That would make its way over, but
it wasn't foreign language.
Doctor Who, it wasn't foreign language subtitles.
Mr. Bean is what I would watch on PBS.
Yeah. So,
I think it was.
So there's definitely stuff that made its way across the ocean, but it wasn't the majority of stuff. Like you said, it was mostly English language stuff from the UK.
And I do think anime started becoming a big thing. And of course, the classic foreign films Kurosawa stuff. There were some the big auteur films, the big auteur French films, and then some anime started becoming big.
Godzilla and stuff.
But it wasn't, but those were always dubbed. You know what I mean? Those weren't original language.
Then you
they would
had
edit them all up and everything.
The Fulci zombie movies and, Suspiria and stuff like that. So stuff did make its way over, but it's not like it is today. Because today, any movie you make, if you put it on the streaming services and you have the correct, subtitle files or a dub, you can release it globally yourself pretty easily, as opposed to back then it wasn't that way. So,
and I'm talking about the big Godard, Fellini, you know what I mean? Those are the ones that would come over and they would show in theaters. But this probably wouldn't be hitting the art house theaters, you know what I mean, in the 70s and 80s, late 80s, but still.
Yeah, so like I said, the basic premise is a kid has to defend against a Santa breaking into the house. Home Alone came out a year later, but with the turnaround time that movie projects took back in that era, when you're shooting on film and you have all the casting and all that stuff that took a lot longer to get in motion back in that era, I don't know that a year is enough run-up time. Because, I know you mentioned like there may have been like a year and a half based on when they saw it versus release time.
Yeah, I don't think there was...
Back then, without the... Because now you have the digital release system, so they can just upload a file to a server, then the movie theater is able to download it. So they are making tweaks on movies up until the week before release sometimes on the special effects and things. Back then, it wasn't that way. You cut the film, you had the reels, you sent it out. So you probably need to have a lot more lead time with the film being completed before it's in theaters. So did they steal the idea? I don't know, because it's also not that similar in any way, shape, or form, aside from the fact there's a couple of booby traps. And
I mean, it was a kid defending his home, but it very much structurally and everything, it's totally different.
Yeah,
and
and
thematically.
Like Home Alone feels more like Three Stooges in this.
And it's just this. I mean, so do we want to get into spoilers on this? I mean, I feel like we almost can. Like, we can give our brief thoughts, but like I think this is like maybe an important footnote and like a fun, weird thing. But obviously, if you are comparing this to Home Alone, you see where the writing fails. Like, some of this is a slog at times, or you're kind of just waiting for. I think you're waiting for that Home Alone action, knowing it's what kind of film this is.
Yeah, knowing that backstory context.
And two, the big thing that Home Alone is successful at is watching Kevin. Like, it's coming. Watching Kevin set up the traps, he knows they're coming. All that preparation, and then the payoff. Or this. There's really no, like, maybe you see that there's a trap floor on the ground, and okay, that's going to be used later. But there's never any, like, you never see this kid's wits as far as like building a big plan. Kevin even rolls out like a big thing. It's his game plan. That's the fun of that film also.
Yeah. And two, like, something I would say is, this being, obviously a lower budgeted production than Home Alone, and not having, Joe Pesci and people in it. Deadly Games. We'll just call it that, since that's the name of it.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah,
but in Deadly Games, there are times where the characters will be caught up, and then just cuts ahead, and they're not. It's like, what happened? and
it'll be what now?
Like, there's times where, like, I don't think it's spoiler. Like, there's times where the Santa character will get the kid, and then it just cuts ahead, where it's like, we've missed like 5 minutes here.
Yeah.
And like, I guess the idea is like the cat and mouse thing. And that's the thing, I think, with a lot of film, with French film, with South Korean film, with a lot of foreign film, there's a lot of story stuff that happens like that. Because, like, what was the one we did? I Am the Devil, or I Saw the Devil, where it's like, dude just captured the dude and killed the dude. It's over in 30 minutes. So then there's this huge leap of logic that a lot of American audiences aren't used to seeing in films, where it's like, you had it over then. Why did you let this drag on? Like,
but I think... That's a digress, but I think I Saw the Devil was like him punishing him over.
I'm just saying, but there's a lot of times, like, if an American audience, if you show like a wide stream audience, they get so upset about little decision things like that. Because Prometheus, people tore it to shreds because a character ran in a straight line versus running. Yeah. So it's just one of those things where a lot of times with movies, you really, for a widespread American audience, you need to have it kind of logically thought through and not have character machinations and decisions that aren't fully spelled out with you seeing why they would make that decision.
Except for Saul.
I mean, again, Home Alone does this to a T. Like, every little thing, they're like, oh, we'll show the telephone line going out.
Everything's set up.
They knocked out the power and telephone. Then they say the power's fixed, but the telephone's not. His plane tickets gets, like, the kids there, like, they think of everything, so nobody could, like, nitpick this thing because
but that
audiences are little babies about that stuff.
But that, again, though, that is a credit to somebody like John Hughes and his writing staff.
Well, Chris Columbus, John Hughes did write that, right?
Yes, Chris Columbus directed. Because he was supposed to direct Christmas Vacation, but Chevy Chase was unagreeable with him.
Yeah, I mean, that film is like, I love that film because it's so tightly written.
Allegedly.
What?
Allegedly that they didn't get along.
Well,
actually, that's listen to the Movie Crypt podcast, the Adam Green and Joe Lynch, and they had Chris Columbus on, and he talked about, he went to dinner with John Hughes and Chevy Chase was just so difficult and rude to him throughout just the dinner. He's like, I can't do this movie for you, man.
Did you see that clip? I think I sent it to you, Chevy Chase talking about Nothing But Trouble recently.
Yeah.
And Demi Moore. What did he say about her?
She's talking about she's a nightmare or something. Yeah. It's like, dude, based on the stories I've heard.
Yeah,
it could be, she was a nightmare after you made 50,000 sexist jokes and tried to, got her upset. But I mean, allegedly, I don't know.
Yeah.
Chevy Chase is watching this right now.
Yes.
I haven't heard anything bad about it anymore, but not that I follow celeb gossip. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
I've heard more bad stories about Chevy Chase, even though I am a much bigger fan of most of his films on screen than hers.
Well,
and I appreciate her as an actress.
But yeah, just like going back to Deadly Games, like, you know, kind of giving general thoughts and things. So what I would say is, you know, if you hear the story about like, oh, Home Alone plagiarized this movie. So you're not going to, so if you have just for instance, a 10-year-old kid that you show Home Alone and they love it, you can't just immediately plop this movie in front of them, like right behind it, and they enjoy it. They'll probably be bored out of their mind.
Or traumatized through like maybe one little part.
Yes,
Well, because like Home Alone had a much more kid-friendly vibe.
Well,
to
something
it.
too,
Like I said,
This is a horror film.
yeah, and
something
like
too
Home
that's
Alone
another
is very Three
digression.
Stooges.
Just real quick is like something I saw that was like made me angry. So Bloody Disgusting had an article about this film that they had posted like, okay, here's this film. They kind of break down what it is and what to think of it, and they put like a warning in it. It's like, warning, around the such and such mark, there is some violence towards an animal. And people in the comments like, why do you have to caveat it? Horror's a genre where everything goes. Nothing should be taboo. You shouldn't have to explain stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, here's the thing, guys. Your view of horror is from watching nothing but 80s slashers where they just went to ridiculous lengths with the gore and
to blow
stuff
people
like that.
up. And
horror has historically been a genre that does show some restraint. Even though The Exorcist scared people completely back when it came out, it wasn't over the top. It didn't show her like bite the head off of a cat and then spit it in somebody's face and then do all this crazy stuff. So the idea
would have been better if it had.
So this movie is not, like, most people can watch the movie, it's fine. There is like violence against animals, which to me is more upsetting typically than humans, because animals are more, they're unaware of their circumstances and mortality, and typically are more pure than people, because most of the times you see an animal and it's just, I love you, owner. You're my favorite thing in this planet. And that's really their only motivation, as opposed to people have this, even children have this wide range of like good and bad qualities that you see, as opposed to animal, you only see the good quality.
Unless it's the weed smoking.
So,
beer
like,
drinking
people need to calm down. Horror should not be a genre where you can just have somebody kill an animal, then rape someone with the corpse. Like, it's not, like, you can do that if you want and you finance the movie, but if someone pointing out that that's something to look out for or possibly avoid if it would upset them, that's fine. Because there's an entire broad range of horror. And
well, there's a broad range of audience members. And, you know, it's getting, you know, younger audience members all the time. Not younger, but newer ones, because they're aging into it, maybe getting more interested in it.
just because
it's different people visiting that site now probably than there were 15 years ago.
And horror seems to always kind of target, I mean, in my opinion, maybe I'm completely wrong, but the younger generation. Not that you don't have people our age over their interests, obviously do, but I feel like a lot of times your horror kind of tries to target the people that late high school, early college, you know, because that's kind of what you do.
Yeah, because high schoolers and teenagers sell the most tickets for movies. They're consistently going to the theaters, and you offer them a horror film, and it's not wrong that someone, like, I don't know, I just remember like when Scream got big, people hated Scream, who were like the old school fans. Like, it didn't even show any boobs. And they didn't even cut anyone's head off. They didn't even show any on-screen gore. So it's just like the people who grew up on the 80s slashers hated the 90s slashers. I mean, some of them for good reason. Some of those like sequels and knockoffs were terrible.
But people like still have a huge...
But then if you go back and watch, some of these movies that you're referencing weren't good themselves, just the time you saw them. So the point is... I don't know.
Talking about the boobs real quick, I don't know if it was Black Christmas, because Joe Bob did that recently, you know, in his Christmas stream like this weekend.
Yeah.
And... Black Christmas, he's not like a huge fan of it. The original.
He gave like a 3 out of 5.
And I'm like not actually huge either, but somebody said, is there no nudity in that one?
I don't remember there being.
I don't know if it was that one or
just
the
Margot.
But essentially they were like, oh, and they're like, you people aren't paying attention. He gives a half a star off no matter what if there's no boobs in the film.
Yeah. Well, remember, like, there was a whole thing about him talking about the new Black Christmas, which none of us have seen.
Yeah, which we talked about that last time on the podcast.
But this movie.
And again, that's for young audiences, exactly what we're talking about. You know, it's a PG-13 slasher film directed towards an audience that is not mid-30s guys.
It's funny that people were saying, like, this movie shouldn't exist. It's like, oh, my God, they made one movie that wasn't directly for you.
Yeah.
Well, there's an entire argument I got on my Twitter about that.
I haven't been a huge fan of the later Fast and Furious franchise. I think they should just cut it off because it's not for me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
I'll kill you.
No, this is going to exist.
They're a family. We can't tear apart the family.
We can't tear apart the family.
But Deadly Game. So this is one, like you said. So I don't know that it doesn't have the same, like, so one, it's a French film in French with subtitles. That's fine. I love a lot of, my favorite movies is Pan's Labyrinth.
I took French in high school for 2 years, and I can tell you that I have a large sausage in French. That's the extent of my, French-speaking abilities.
But like so the point was just the pacing of it and some of the story stuff does require a little bit of suspension of disbelief just because you have to go with it.
But also, you're saying this, William, but that's same thing can be said for any American crappy 80s slasher. It's just not good writing. It's just not good writing.
It can be said for any Halloween. It's extremely boring now, so it's true of any movie.
But I'm saying like that's any nationality. Just the writing's not as good, especially if you are mentally comparing it to Home Alone. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I think like a big difference between Home Alone.
And I don't think it's. Yeah, I mean, like it's not.
Would have been.
I don't think it's always slow. It's just not always exciting. The tension isn't getting ratcheted up in a meaningful way in this film as it goes along until you hit to that point. And then it's not really used to maximum benefit. I think that's the fault in it, and that has to do with the writing. Yeah,
because like a big thing is like, so I don't want to do too much comparison to Home Alone, but Home Alone...
It's a fair comparison.
They wanted to compare when they sued
with all the traps that Kevin had set up in the house and such. So the house of Deadly Games is larger than the house from Home Alone.
It's like if the kid from... It's like Blank Check meets... Did you ever see that movie Rambo?
Ramboner?
B-O-W, where the little kid is trying to make a Rambo film.
No.
It's new-ish, isn't it?
It's probably like 10 years old.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I think it's a British film.
Yeah.
It's a kid on the cover. I mean, he looks like he's like this almost. It's like mixed with that, mixed with...
I remember watching that.
Home Alone and like Blank Check, because this kid's mom is she runs like a toy company basically, right? Or a toy store
she
or
works
whatever.
At a store, just a bit. She works a large retail
and
store.
And so they have an insane, unrealistic mansion with like, booby traps, and it's just like a cartoon
something
house.
Out of a Tim Burton
It's
movie.
a cartoon house almost.
It's like they live in the Wayne Manor or something from Batman. But yeah, so you have, the point was like, in terms of comparing those movies, so part of it is like in Deadly Games, the kid and the Santa killer will cross paths multiple times and the movie keeps going. And there's not like just the only justification is the guy just wants to toy with them. As opposed to Home Alone was set up where the only time they actually cross paths and Marv and whatever got Kevin, there was immediately something that followed that made sense in world. And it wasn't them just saying, "We're going to get you, kid. Why don't you run over there and we'll scare you." Mm-hmm. Like, so I think some of that could be frustrating to viewers, but like, and then the main part of the reason that would be frustrating is if you've watched both movies somewhat recently together and you know about the history of it. But if you just watch it in its own, it was mostly intended as kind of a homage to action films, right? Like to Rambo and stuff like that. And the director was saying, like, in the 80s, homage, it was mostly either you made just a clone of the popular film or you made a straight up, Zucker Brothers airplane style spoof. You didn't really do a movie that had homage to it and played some things for comedy, but was mostly a straight film.
Which is almost like, say, Shaun of the Dead or something. That was like, Edgar Wright always say, it's not a spoof. Like, Shaun of the Dead is not a spoof. We made one of these films, but it is comedic, It
has comedy elements.
A self-referential film that then itself becomes an entry into the genre.
And which he even mentioned, like, not that it's the same thing, but he mentions, like, we kind of, like, broke the third wall, He brought up Deadpool, but it was like, I think it was more of like, hey, we are aware that the audience is aware that we are making direct references to like Rambo basically, but we're not trying to, we're trying to do something different. I
always kind of feel like Shaun of the Dead was in the same wheelhouse as like American Werewolf in London, because I feel like that movie, while it played it straight, had a lot of elements that were just kind of like toying with the audience.
It changes tone. Sometimes it's pretty serious.
Because you have like the Nazi werewolves that they're fighting. It had all the weird stuff in that just very different.
Well, it's just one of those things too where like at the end of the day, you can look at Shaun of the Dead or some of those movies and like, oh, this is some people's favorite zombie film.
And that's a foreign film, right? Technically?
Huh?
And Shaun of the Dead technically
British.
Film?
Yeah.
So British, but I mean...
It's still English, it's a foreign film.
But the point being... you could if a movie is so Scream was self-referential to slashers, but was a bona fide entry into the slasher genre.
Yeah.
So I think at the time back in the 80s that wasn't as commonplace and people weren't as happy because even something like Evil Dead 2 that was kind of like a comedy. It did decent for its budget, but it was like a small cult hit.
Yeah.
But then you look at, current things and it's much more common to do homage to a genre within a film or whatever. But
one of the movies we just talked about recently was Scary Movie. I mean, that kind of goes with the Zucker Brothers Airplanes.
That did not become an entry in that
No.
genre.
But it was definitely like an homage.
So I think it was a Polygon article. Don't they specifically say, like, they even mentioned, like, Stranger Things? They're like, didn't they mention that in here? Yeah. It's like you can be excused for thinking it was made in 2018 by the Stranger Things crew.
Which I don't agree with that at all. I don't think
there's no charm. Like, this film lacks a bunch of charm.
So no. I think they're saying their reverence for 80s films. Like, instead of him dressed up like a Ghostbuster, it is him dressed up like Rambo. I think that's what they're. I think that was.
Well, I think part of the difference is if it was shot in the 80s, they don't have to do all the homage. It was just in the time.
But still,
So giving the movie like just an idea of a score of how much we think you should check it out because it's on Shudder. So if you have that service, you can get like a trial if you've never had it, or you can just get it for like what $50 a year.
It's either $5 a month or maybe $46 a year.
Yeah, you save a little
regardless,
bit.
And sometimes they have deals, and
they have other stuff on there. We talked about One Cut of the Dead, which is a movie we definitely recommend you watch.
I mean, like again, my whole thing is like, hey, you're supporting horror. Like they curate, they want to make like a great horror library. Like Netflix. That is a drop in the bucket of, you know what I mean? Netflix is the Walmart of streaming site. So it's great. You can get so much there, but they are not trying to, I guess, grow the horror community. So
they will make their original stuff like Haunting of Hill House or the series.
Which is great, yeah.
Which are like one of my favorite things of 2018. But in terms of like the actual horror films on the service, like...
But see, it's changed a lot because when I initially had Netflix, when I first got the streaming option, it was vastly different.
Well, they had the Sentinel, they had a lot of classics.
They had a whole lot of stuff on there, and it was very cool for horror for a long time. But then as they got into their originals,
but I think what they have seen, unfortunately, and this is a trend across all movie watching, is audiences gravitated to things made in the last 15 years. Yeah. So people went for the stuff made in the past 5. So with horror, depending on the studio deals and who has what, there's a lot of horror films that just will not end up on Netflix because the studios making them don't have a deal with Netflix and or are studios that are going to be launching their own. Yeah. So HBO Max is coming out.
Which I told you, listen to that thing. I don't know if Derek was on there, but I don't know if this still is true, but Joe Dante was talking about Warner Brothers has made 2/3 of the films ever made. So if they're HBO Max, they have the Warner Brothers films on there. That's Warner Brothers. That's a lot of shit. Could have a lot of, you're not realizing all that stuff would get pulled from Netflix. So
you're going to end up with, because I was looking it up, so Home Alone is on Disney+.
Because it's Fox.
So what's going to happen is you need to have Netflix, you need to have HBO Max, you need to have Hulu, you need to have Amazon Prime, you need to have Disney+. There's like, that's the base, but then...
But think about everything Universal, you get with that.
NBC Universal is making their own streaming service. Like, are they going to have all the Universal monster films?
Then you got to have the internet to watch all that stuff. So you're still not cutting the cord.
My mom asked me, because she thought she had Verizon. You get like, if you have Verizon Unlimited, you get Disney Plus for a year. She was wondering because, for my daughter over there. And she doesn't. She has like unlimited talk or whatever. And then I said, well, because she went to watch Home Alone. I said, well, I have it digitally. I said, it's on Disney Plus. If you can get that for free, we found out she could. I was like, you can buy Home Alone for like $10. She was like, oh, she's like, is there anything where I can just pay $10 and have like every movie? And I'm like, no, there's not. You can't just have every single movie for $10.
$10 for every movie. Well, it's funny.
That's what people think now. But it's like, dude, you realize before you had to spend $10 per movie or $20 per movie. Like, I understand, and if you don't use it, you don't use it. But
if you don't use it, you'll lose it.
I think what will be interesting is just to see how the stream, who's going to die real quick. Because when the streaming, like all this stuff comes out, like
I want to know what Netflix is going to look like in 5 years because. Are they only going to have the original stuff?
I can't tell you the last time because I watched BoJack Horseman and I'll watch that again in January when the rest of it comes out. But outside of that, like every time I get on Netflix, there's not shit on it.
The Irishman is good.
It's a 3.5 hour.
What you're going to have
is like this second. That's the best American film of the year, I think.
But it's also Scorsese.
So what you're going to have happen is with my
isn't it about Jimmy Hoffa?
Yeah, it's really
So
good.
what
Actually,
my-
that Jimmy Hoffa?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Al
what
Pacino
my
plays Jimmy
prognostication
Hoffa.
is that with Netflix, that in 5 years from now, once everybody's launched their own service, because there's also the CBS, blah, blah, blah. So once everybody's launched their own service, the movies they will have that aren't their original creations are either going to be indie films that kind of got bundled together and sold to them. And not like the R-level $10,000 budget movies, but like the $5 million Sundance Cannes type films, or the movies from the Warner Brothers, Fox, Disney back catalogs that they figured they'll make more money from licensing to a competing service than they will get from revenue of people watching that on their own. So kind of smaller, obscure titles they don't care as much about, or recent kind of cash grabby small movies they just try to put out for $1. That's probably what's going to happen. But
I wonder if that's why they've been burning, because everybody's like, oh, they're burning through so much money making original content. I wonder if that's why, because it's like, hey, we realize we've got to build up our library because within 5 years, everybody's going to be pulling all their
even
stuff.
shows they made on their own, like American Vandal, part of the reason they dropped it was they were producing it and releasing the seasons, and they owned the seasons they made. But the show itself was it College Humor, Funny or Die? Regardless, they didn't own the actual production. So there's a company they worked with to make it. They want stuff they own from end to end. They want to come up to somebody and say, here's the money. You work for us. We own this work into perpetuity. That's
kind of the rumor why they ended BoJack this season, because BoJack got the licensing rights for the Comedy Central.
Which makes sense because they don't want stuff that they can't. But so Deadly Game. So
I don't think we're not very high on it because we talked about a lot of
I don't know that I would say that Deadly Games is definitely worth going out and getting Shudder on its own just to watch it.
No, but there's a bunch of
stuff on Shudder. I would say One Cut of the Dead is something I think you should at least get 1 month to watch and give it a chance.
There's a lot of good stuff. Like Terrified. I watched that last year. That was really good. I think it was I don't know if it was a Spanish horror film. Now I can't think of. There's one that was a film from India, a horror film. There's just like what is the Tigers? Tigers Are Not Afraid.
Yeah,
that was pretty good. That was pretty good. I like that quite a bit. But there's so much little stuff in there that I'm glad Shudder's buying these things up and like.
Well, and Shudder themselves are a subset of AMC, so So this movie, like giving it a score out of 10, because I was just looking up to see the IMDb. So the average user score on IMDb is 6.4 out of 10. And this is a movie that's older, so getting like a consensus critic score would be kind of difficult. That's worthwhile looking at. And I don't think that's too far off the mark, like a 6.5. Like something it is enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love it. I'll probably get like a 5 or 6, but I think it's one of those. It's just an awesome like footnote in horror film history, especially if you've been watching the same kind of, the same Santa slasher films for 10, 15 years that were made, 30 years ago. It's like, okay, here's something that was actually made that long ago that now you're maybe seeing for the first time. Like it has a huge novelty factor that I think it makes it worth watching.
It has a different idea to it. It just, some of it is like, and it's hard not to, and especially because I watched Home Alone like right before I watched this.
I watched Home Alone probably 15 times this year already. Yeah. Before that,
so I've watched it a lot. So then you go that, and it's hard not to draw direct comparisons because Home Alone's got John Hughes writing. You got a little bit of John Candy in there. You just got so much charm.
Apparently, all of John Candy's stuff was improv.
And he got paid
one day.
He got paid less money for doing that because it was a favorite of John Hughes, and then the pizza delivery guy did. He made more money than.
So then, as a return, he let him shoot all the stuff in one day and let him pretty much improv all of his lines.
But it took 23 hours.
That's a long day. That's an indie film day.
Anyway, because there's a show called The Movies That Made Us. They covered Home Alone on it.
Yeah,
I haven't watched that episode.
It's really,
it's
really interesting.
I watched a bunch of the behind the scenes stuff.
But where I'm at with my score is like given all that, and like I just got kind of bored with it, and it had some novel ideas, and it had some stuff that I did enjoy, but overall, like it's really hard for me to recommend this to anybody. Like Shudder is cool because I just signed up for a free trial for it. But I would recommend the service, but this would not be anything I'd recommend. Like, hey, get this to watch.
I mean, like I said, if you've burned through a lot of the crappy, Santa slashers and you want to watch some, and just as a novelty thing. But also, too, I do think it looks great. I think it looks really cool.
I think it's because
it looks like a music video almost.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you can imagine this, like the art direction for it in the house they're in. Almost has like when I was watching, because we had just watched Batman Returns recently too.
So
at the same time, I was like, it's
style.
kind of like a Burton-ish like mansion, Because there's like a part where there's like the kid knows of like a wall that's in the house or something where there's like there's a big hidden room where there's like a ton of toys everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That does look like something out of, an Edward Scissorhands or something like that.
To me, this kind of felt like a movie that like Tim Burton produced, but didn't really actually do anything on. They just took his stylings because there's James and Jack Peach was kind of like that.
So like,
and I love when I watch films that like teach me something about a culture or even a specific time.
The Minitel.
I had no idea about the basically pre-internet system they had that were like kiosks in the city streets and all that stuff.
Yeah, so you could have
that's awesome.
So basically, it was a precursor, like a small scale internet, where you could log onto servers and go to chat rooms based on keywords and chat back and forth. And they did have public terminals. So like watching it, it almost seems like a surreal retro futuristic idea of what technology is. But obviously it was apparently like a real thing in France, just since we here did not have that.
And it's like, it's the typical like being afraid of strangers on the internet thing, but a film with that. And
the director had said that he, while trying to find somewhere to get flowers for a relative, came across a sex chat room on accident.
Yeah.
And his point was like, what if a kid gets in this and is trying to find something about Santa or a toy or whatever, and then they end up in like an adult person that's going to do ill will or harm towards them, which is an interesting concept and something that is still being explored today because today, of course, the internet's such more prevalent.
Like, one thing I think would be kind of cool is to take ideas like this from different movies and then have it kind of portrayed in the 80s, 90s-esque, like Unsolved Mysteries format where you get like little things like this. Because like this to me is cooler in maybe 15 minutes than it is however long this movie was.
Well, I would just say...
I think the setup, like, I appreciate the setup for it, but I don't think it really adds much where he works for her. He chats with him, then he finds out, it feels like a big coincidence. Like, then he finds out that's her kid or something. Like he kind of knows. And that whole, it's like, you're just kind of waiting for the end of it. And it's like, I wish the end of it would have started.
It took a lot of time
earlier
to set up the coincidental factors of how this all came together. And honestly, that's not as important. As long as you give a somewhat plausible reason, because you just set up a lot of stuff that until you have like the thing where the mom is sleeping with their coworker. Which is unethical.
Well, this is where
the kid knows about it because he messages the guy on his fax machine at some point at the end from his computer.
Well, this is where you look at like the Home Alone comparisons, and it's like everything makes a little more sense because they didn't get as convoluted. And like Joe Pesci showing up as a cop to kind of case the neighborhood.
Yeah, it starts out right away. Like
because they're too busy getting ready to go, so they just see him in a cop uniform. It makes sense.
Everything feels really organic.
But how often, if you were sitting there and a cop came by your neighborhood and like knocked on your door, do you really, get into in-depth, especially in that time? Maybe not current day, but you go back 30 years ago.
This like high-end white neighborhood, they're probably like, the cops always,
Yeah, they're in the affluent Chicago suburb because I think that
that's where that makes more sense, where this one is a little more convoluted.
So I think the house that was used as the exterior and some of the stuff for Home Alone sold recently for like $1.5 million or $2 million, something like that.
The Beverly, my family brought this up because we were watching Home Alone. The Beverly Hills Hillbillies mansion from the movie sold for $150 million recently.
Damn. That's a lot.
Because they were like, it wasn't this one, right? I'm like, no, that house, Home Alone house did not sell for $150 million. I can tell you without looking it up.
Yeah, it was like around $2 million. Because but yeah, so just the idea is like, so the mansion in Deadly Games is just so huge that it has like a really high, tall roof that comes into play in the movie. And, it's the perfect setting for this type of thing to happen and for that guy to go to. And because you come into like a house the size of mine that we're shooting this in right now, there's a crazy person chasing with a knife, it'd be over pretty quick.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places to go.
There's not.
So you really need an unrealistically large house.
You'd be dead, William.
No, they'd be dead. I'd use the weapons I have and the traps I have spread throughout the house. I've got cats that'll trip you, and then they will nibble on you, and you'll have to go to the doctor and get antibiotics.
Have you ever seen the Tom Jane Punisher? Just think about that.
But
William. Yeah, but William.
Well,
anywhere there could be a gun.
So, I think it looks great. It definitely has some charm to it. I like the Killer Santa. He has an interesting look to him, and I just like the whole sequence of him like spraying his
He kind
beard.
of looks like Windows from The Thing.
I was saying there's a lot of cool aspects of it. I just think for me, like I would like to see something like this packaged in a 15-20 minute thing with other stuff similar where it just has like the 80s.
Or rewritten, honestly. Like,
yeah.
And what's weird is like, I think, what was it? I don't know, it was last Christmas. Basically, when this trailer came out, I had written a short film. And I'll just go ahead and say what it was, because now I'm not going to do it because it's too close. And I'm like, oh, damn, that's like so close. Mine was obviously a response to Home Alone, but essentially it was like a kid who is getting put to sleep by his parents, and he's talking about wanting to catch Santa, and they're like, no, make sure you got to stay asleep because, you can't get Santa. And I don't remember why. There was, for some reason, he was wanting to get, I don't know, he's wanting to trap Santa or get vengeance on him, essentially. So the kid sets up, like Home Alone, it was going to have a sequence of him setting up all these like deadly traps. Yeah. And then Santa comes in and he's like getting caught up in them and like getting tortured and maimed, and the kids doing all this stuff. And then he finally kills him. He realizes it's his dad trying to bring him presents. And that was going to be the end of it. Because it was like a 10-minute short film. But then I saw the trailer for this.
And I was like, damn it.
Like a year ago or whenever they first released, a year and a half ago. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm kind of glad I didn't make it, because everybody would have thought I was just making a version of this.
You still get an email from that director? Yeah. I know what you're doing. Like, what do you even know?
I know what you did last summer. But yeah, so like, so I think now we're going to discuss the spoilers from the movie Deadly Games, just because we need to kind of go through.
And we can blow through this because there's really not.
Yeah. So the big thing that would upset people and that I saw coming was when the Santa gets to the house, one of the first things he does is kills the dog. Because if the dog is alive throughout, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Because dogs will bark, they could attack Santa.
It's pretty brutal too. And he grabs the pie serving thing too,
and stabs him.
Yeah.
And then the kid. So the thing too is the kid throughout thinks that this is the actual Santa Claus, who is
that's what's horrifying too.
Yeah.
And because he was like, so earlier in the movie, so you set up the stuff like the mom works at the mall or whatever,
which is the premise for Silent Night.
His friend is over and they're on the internet in the chat room. And the friend even says, like, this probably isn't even Santa. It's probably just some sicko. And the kid believes he's talking to Santa, and it's our killer who wants to know where they live and all this stuff. And he doesn't tell him, but he does give the Santa enough detail that he can go and find the mom's place of work. And then
it's not quite on the nose, but it's almost like a coming of age or losing of innocence thing where the kid, he wants to believe in Santa. And even whenever Santa kills the dog and him and the grandpa are in that big room, the grandpa actually doesn't tell him there's no Santa, because the kid says something about, this is Santa, and the grandpa's like, oh yeah, Santa. Like he still doesn't like having come to Jesus, like hey.
He's choking the kid. He's like, Santa.
Yeah. No, not Santa. Yeah, so you have the threat throughout the movie is that the killer will kill either the kid or the grandfather, because he does kill the help who live in the house close to the mansion that are like, I guess they're, I don't want to say servants, but they're housekeepers or whatever. So he kills both of them pretty quick. He kills a cop at one point. And he almost gets the grandpa like 4 or 5 times. But then he doesn't, because like the kid will save him
almost
the last
gets the neighbor
second.
kid too that comes over.
Yeah, he almost gets the neighbor kid who's riding a bicycle in the snow. And I did that as a kid. That's not a wise decision.
Yeah.
You will fall on your face.
I thought that kid was going to get it in the film. I was like, oh man, he's going to get it. That's going to be really brutal to watch just Santa kill a kid after killing a dog too. Like, those two things you normally don't see. You see the dog sometimes, but
you don't get a kid and a dog.
You don't get a kid and a dog. Yeah, that double combo.
Well, it just feels like
card punch right there.
Some of the animals would feel like it'd be like crass and just to do it and get attention.
But you're talking about 80s horror films.
No, I'm saying, but like even they had some limits.
Yes,
some of them.
Well, the ones that got released theatrically, because they caused them to cut stuff out. But like, so this movie,
so this only ran a week in theaters, so they could have
qualified as a
theatrical release,
so that they could get a better TV deal in France and on video.
Yeah, and then I guess it did well on video too, right? And it did pretty well on video. So I was like, sounded like it was decently successful for what it was, except for the whole not getting distributed in America, which it sounds like they probably weren't really planning on that anyway.
Well, too, back in that era, movies, like, it was a different pipeline for the life of the film. Because there were cable networks starting to come around, but there weren't as many. There weren't streaming services, or anything like that yet. So it was mostly you had a theatrical release if your movie warranted it. And then it had the video release where it would be rented in stores and sold. And back then, rentals were much bigger because the cost of movies that to buy new was so high.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about $80 for a new movie.
Which is insane.
And then they would
My mom's like, can we get every movie for $10?
Yeah. Well, you can join that one thing where they send you a movie in the mail.
Yeah.
And then you're indebted. Like, there's probably still people that are on those lists and can't get off. But the idea is just, it would go to small theater run, go to video stores, be sold, probably be shown on some like cable channel at midnight or some deal. And then once that movie's popularity ended, that was kind of it. And that was, even in America, that was a lot of the lifeline of a lot of movies.
And that was fine. People were making movies because they wanted to make movies. Because people want to make money, make a little money.
You're talking about like Nothing But Trouble. That's not on Blu-ray and DVD. I think there are DVD copies.
I have a DVD copy.
But it's pretty rare, and it's not in production now and easy to find. Which boggles my mind that movie is not on like streaming services and Blu-ray.
You've heard so much about it. Like for me, just listen to all the different podcasts and people following Twitter and stuff and Instagram. Like I've heard enough about it from all these different areas that you think that
I made a video about that a few years ago.
Have you seen it, Derek?
I've seen parts of it.
I have the DVD. I bought it when I worked at GameStop.
Yeah.
It came in used, and I'm like, okay, I liked this movie when I was a kid.
Because I
didn't know it was rare.
Because I had done a video on it a few years ago, back when I was first getting into doing video stuff. If I did one now, it'd probably be a little bit better produced and voiced and stuff. But it's been like our most popular video in the past 2 months. Just in terms of people finding it because everybody's looking for that movie.
Yeah, that movie's been kind of... I don't know what...
Let's just rip it and put it on our YouTube channel.
I don't remember where I got... I think I borrowed a copy or something to make that video. I don't remember how I got all the footage for it. But point being, it was difficult. Like back at, that era wasn't one where a movie that had any level of cult success then got pushed far and wide like happens today with merchandising and tie-ins and all that stuff. It just didn't happen. So that's why that movie kind of had this kind of cult following of people that had seen it in, the European release or bootlegs or whatever over here. And then that's why they had the kind of groundswell of support to do a screening of it in the US and to get it back out there. Now it is out there. And it's one of those things where I think it's worth watching, but it's not a must watch. It's not like an amazing film that just hasn't been able to been seen. I think it's enjoyable, and if you're into the overall kind of 80s aesthetic and kind of these smaller unknown movies, absolutely go watch it. But I don't think that it rises to the level of like an absolute must-watch classic that people.
No, it's not some lost classic, but it is like I think it was worth its re-release and resurgence for sure.
Oh, it's good that it's out there.
Yeah, I think for sure this is a film that should not have been lost.
And the thing I was talking about that's somewhat confusing, there are parts in the movie where it seems like they just kind of jump the editing ahead about 5 minutes in movie time, because there's times where they'll be at a point and then it just kind of jumps to the next thing. And the traps, a lot of the trap stuff, they very heavily foreshadow that the kid has a button he can push that makes the floor collapse and there's a net under the floor. And they show that early in the movie, so you think it's going to play a big role. And he uses it, and the Santa falls in, and he just runs off, and then the Santa's back out. Like, there's nothing to it.
I thought you meant Santa, like, runs off. He's like,
there's really nothing to it. And then when he actually does set up the traps, he uses some of them pretty successfully, but the Santa walks in, the trap goes off, and then you just jump to the next thing, and it's not really showing the fallout of him suffering from it or how he got out of it.
So it's not like in Home Alone where you get hit in the head with the iron and there's like rolling around the ground with a big red splotch on their face and they're trying to get up.
The point being is just like so Home Alone, that would kill people because Better Watch Out even touched on that. The movie we reviewed,
which you should watch that this year.
It's on Shudder, right?
Maybe.
It's on some streaming service.
It's on something. It's a really good Christmas movie.
Or maybe it's on Tubi or Vudu or something.
I have it, so I don't know if I have shared it with you. Vudu, you can share accounts. Maybe you see it on there because I bought it.
Yeah, but you should watch that because that's another movie that kind of falls in this wheelhouse. But that one's like a self-aware, more realistic version.
That is my favorite Christmas horror film.
It's funny because I've seen some people that absolutely hated that, and they're people who like independent film, so you're championing this other thing that I won't mention, and then you hated this. And
which I feel like is kind of clever. Like Better Watch Out is clever enough. It's smart. Who's the dad in that? He's not in it much, though.
Oh, is it Patrick Warburton?
Yeah, Patrick Warburton is the dad. He's not in it much. It's like he's in it less than the dad in Home Alone.
And
probably,
it's got and two of the leads in that are from the M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Oh yeah.
The Visit.
Yeah.
Because the boy and the girl from that are in Better Watch Out. So, I think they came out right around the same time. So that's another movie that's kind of like the cult festival hit that didn't really get a wide release, but now it's out there. So with Deadly Games, it is one. So like I said, there's just the elements of like where the Santa catches the kid and he just, the next thing you know, the kid's running through the house. It's like, why don't you just let him go? He had the knife. He's killed everybody else the second they've been in front of him.
Well, it's kind of like he gets killed, and then you just restart, and then the kid instead
he's like Batman. He has a rule against killing kids. And he's like, oh yes, I forgot my rule.
And then
okay, and then he just forgets.
And then you have those types of elements. They set up the element throughout that like the kids running around and hiding, and then it's really only in like the back third where the traps really come into play. And there's a few of them, like where he gets hit with like darts, which that would mess you up.
Yeah.
And there's like flames or something in like the boiler room type thing.
I wish the movie ended in a game of lawn darts.
Well, then the biggest one was the train the kids set up, where once the train goes far
that
enough,
was pretty cool.
It sets off a bomb.
That felt like Die Hard-esque.
Somehow the Santa knew what it was and how it worked immediately and then turned it back. And then the kid's grandfather hid in the suit of armor, which doesn't really make any sense. It'd be very difficult to do. But the grandpa's hiding
blind grandfather in a suit of armor the whole time watching everything else.
Well, it's kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon where the armor just like opens up on the hinge and closes it back.
So the kid's really concerned it's going to blow up his grandfather. It doesn't.
What's the movie of Samuel L. Jackson from the 90s? They blow a room up. He's tied up in a chair. And it shoots him out of the window, tied up in the chair, and he lands like in the snow, and he breaks out, and he's like, oh, and runs off.
Samuel Jackson?
And it's got the lady from Beetlejuice in it. I can't. And
the writer or the
no, the older
what's her name?
Yeah, from Leave Our Own. I can't think of her name.
Oh yeah, Gina Davis.
Yeah, Gina Davis.
Oh yes, Long Kiss Goodnight, maybe.
Yeah,
which that's on Netflix now. That's a Christmas thing. I've been meaning to watch that
because they just
put it on there.
When I was watching that scene, I was like, Courtney, there's a scene where Samuel Jackson is blown up with a bomb, but it shoots him out of the room, and I was like hoping it was going to kind of happen with that. And it did.
Yeah, that's
I was just
what's his name? The writer of Lethal Weapon and.
Shane Black.
It's a Shane Black written film, yeah.
But I remember that scene where I'm pretty sure that's what happens. They blow a room up. Samuel Jackson's tied up in a chair, but it shoots him out of the room. And it lands, and I think it like breaks a chair or something.
So there's no IMDb trivia for the film, and I didn't really see too much on like Wikipedia or the different articles about it, aside from like the release stuff. But yeah, so you kind of have like in a movie that pulled from this. So in the movie, the kid, they don't have a phone line. But he has the computer that's connected to the internet somehow. There's a different phone line for the computer or something. So he goes and uses the computer to message his friend who comes over and almost gets killed. And then he sends a fax to the guy that works at his mom's company. His mom's friends with benefit. Mm-hmm. He sends it to him. And then, but that was also a plot point that Scream in 1996 did, where Sydney goes up to her room and tries to dial 911 on her computer. So just probably coincidental. It's just funny that the U.S. Internet expansion is so slow. It took 7 years later for that to even be a plot point.
Yeah.
When there's like the net and stuff, but so vastly unrealistic. So you have some elements like that. Like I said, it did seem like they were going to kill the friend, but he managed to get away on his bike, which would be difficult. So
props to him.
Props to him for riding without falling off. Because I remember trying riding my bike in the snow when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then I immediately just plopped off and got the wind knocked out of me. I was like, ugh. And I like flew back and was like, I'm not doing that again. The kid has a very illustrious mullet.
Yeah, very good mullet. What's the song that opens up the film? It's a parody of
Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, is it Eye of the Tiger? Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah,
where it's the kid's getting greased up and putting on his war paint, dressed like Rainbow, to then capture the dog in his net trap.
Which is like the Raimi parodies of Ash getting ready or Shaun of the Dead them getting ready.
And then he has the kid has the little wrist computer.
Yeah. I forgot about the wrist.
So the wrist computer that kind of goes out the window pretty early on because it has. So he sets up, so he's a kid that's really into action films and he's really technologically savvy because he sets up cameras throughout the house that he can control from his little wrist computer so that he can watch video of Santa as he comes in the house at night to prove that it's real. And you would think that his mom or grandfather or somebody would be like, hey, don't waste these thousands of dollars on these gadgets. Instead, Santa's not real.
But, yeah, I mean, it's like Richie Rich also is another combination.
But you have like all those elements. I was just disappointed based on like all the hubbub around the lawsuits and stuff and the plagiarism things. It didn't have more Home Alone-ish elements to it. Or you know,
But if we never would have got Home Alone, you'd been like, "Oh, this was really cool."
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I think if you never got Home Alone, he's probably wasn't happy either. It's like, oh, damn it, you know, like
they went to 11. They nailed it. Traps and because you know this one there was only a few times where he set up. It's like the big difference is he sets up the traps. And you barely get payoff from it, as opposed to Home Alone paid it off completely, even if those guys would have been dead after the first two things.
Now, what if instead of any of this, the precursor to all this was the Corey Feldman Jason or Friday the 13th,
yeah.
And he set up traps for Jason.
The final chapter.
Yeah. That should have been, that's where all this started.
So it is funny how you'll see these kind of different little plot points show up in different movies over the decades. And then you can argue over who inspired who. I mean, I have no idea if anybody stole the movie or not. The concept, I would say it's probably just coincidental because that does happen. We've made stuff or somebody else have made something similar.
I mean, they're both
before or after.
They're both home invasion movies, and you know
how fast did John Hughes write Home Alone? Did they say it in there?
In that one, it took a while to get it because they were trying to go to different publishers, and they had started making the movie somewhere else, and then I think WB dropped it because they didn't think they were making any money. So it was like a year or two long process. So it might have already been written and already existing and floating around.
He wrote Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. What, did he write that in 3 days or something?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Planes, Trains, it was like no more than a week, that first draft. I think it was like 3 days. He just sat down and wrote that film in like 3 days. That's why I didn't know for some reason. He had a lot of clout then if he like wrote Home Alone in like 2 weeks and then was like, okay, we're producing it, you know.
From what I remember on this thing is because he wasn't directing it and they had somebody else directing it and they had an unknown child. And they had a movie about a child with an unknown child star at the time because that was before Macaulay Culkin was really, he'd been in stuff, but he was in
Uncle Buck, and apparently John Hughes kept telling
Christopher
Columbus like, hey, go with him. And he's like, he did like a search with thousands and thousands. And he's like, no, he was like the one.
Yeah.
And then Joe Pesci. So I think they had Joe Pesci and
they had another guy Joe Pesci hated, and they did not get along.
Who was it?
With.
There was
apparently Joe Pesci was the hardest person to work with on that movie.
Well, from what I read,
according to Chris Columbus, he was the most, and other people.
From what I've seen with other stuff, because I think Sean, you shared it where Joe Pesci was on the set of Sesame Street and he attacked Elmo.
Was it Elmo or was it? Yeah, it was somebody.
Because he's sitting there during the takes and he's like, "It's making me nervous. All these kids around. I'm gonna say something that I shouldn't say in front of the kids." Well, and then when he's leaving, Elmo's on the top. He's like, "Elmo, blah blah blah," and then he's like, "Ah," and he's kind of like seething rage, but he's being kind of like Goodfellas, like joking,
he's
funny.
Like joking about
He's hitting Elmo with stuff.
Because Elmo says something about Goodfellas or something. Yeah. He makes a comment about him being in gangster films, and then he like goes to grab him off the thing.
Well, like they were talking about in Home Alone, that was made up because he kept dropping F-bombs.
That's what
they're like
Daniel Stern.
Daniel Stern said it.
Yeah, that you can't do that because this is a kids film. So he made that
show a bunch of archival footage, or do they get new interviews?
There's new interviews and archival.
Okay, because I have the Blu-ray that has like tons of special features.
There's a bunch of archival stuff.
I wanted to watch it, but I know my wife wants to watch it too, so we're gonna do it together.
But so I guess Joe
Home Alone
Pesci
is fucking phenomenal film. Home Alone is so good.
Well, you go back and watch it, and you remember like, okay, that was just a good kids film. But then you have the John Williams score, you have a John Hughes score.
Oh, because I was showing we've completely gone off if you listen to the new Star Wars films, Rey's theme is very similar to the John Williams Home Alone theme. The only because it's got bells and stuff in it.
The last thing about Home Alone after watching that TV,
let's do a Home Alone podcast.
We should, but all those stunts were real. Like there's no pads. There was anything. That was like when they fall off the stairs, they fell off the stairs. Yeah. Like if they were the top and they jumped to the bottom, that was real. That wasn't. There was no pads. They didn't have anything on.
Joe Pesci's head's still recovering from his burn. I'm telling
you, I know this is a long way around it, but you guys need to watch. I mean, just to see Pesci again in The Irishman, and he plays. No, I'm gonna watch it. It's just it's very. I know it's 3.5 hours long, but dude, it's so worth it. It's so good.
I've just been so busy lately. I barely had time to watch something, but so Deadly Games. So Deadly Games is something like we've already given our thoughts on it. Kind of went through all the major plot points. Yeah, at the end, the kid succeeds. The mom and the boyfriend get there after she goes off the mountain or something. So that, they get back and the kid and the grandfather, they're alive. Or I guess the grandfather's okay because he needed insulin.
Yeah.
It never really shows if he got it.
That's another plot point from that Jodie movie with the Kristen Stewart in the safe room or whatever. I can't remember the name of it.
Kristen Stewart.
It's got Kristen Stewart, and she's diabetic, and she goes into a shock, and there's like people in their house. Jared Leto's in it.
I think I watched that.
And she needs insulin.
Is it from like 5 years ago, maybe?
Oh, God, no. This is from like 20 years ago.
Oh, no.
Probably. This is from like...
Kristen Stewart from Twilight?
Yeah. She's like real young in it. And it's like the safe room or something.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Jodie Foster?
Yeah, Jodie Foster's
the
in it.
Fincher movie.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Because Jared Leto's in it. I think they catch him on fire.
Safe Room or whatever that game was called.
Panic Room?
Panic Room.
Yeah, I watched Panic.
It's like the same kind of plot from Panic.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's like one of the big
I've been
elements.
wanting to do that. I wouldn't want to revisit that because last time I watched that was at Joey Roby's house in high school. And that was the last time. And that's a Fincher film. Like, I had
I remember what's funny is like, there's been a lot of movies in recent years like, Skyfall has a Home Alone section.
That's why when I watched that movie and he starts setting up like, holy shit, this is going to be like Home Alone. And I love that. Like, that's why I love that sequence.
But then too, like I was thinking like, where else could that have come from? Predator. The original Arnold Schwarzenegger setting up all the traps for Predator.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of prior,
Yeah, that's probably where this
pulled it from.
Yeah.
The idea of
what year was Predator?
It was like 87.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Rambo also did that too because he set all the traps up for the guys in the woods. Because remember, like he catches all of them in the Vietnam era traps and stuff.
So it's just like, like Rambo, Predator. A lot of these action films have the idea of the hero setting up traps for the villains because they're outmanned. And
did you see that Photoshop image of Kevin at the top of the stairs with his like BB gun over him? With Stallone's face. It's horrifying.
Well, then too, there's that one meme that I sent to you all that's like, if Home Alone took place today, and it's like Kevin gets his phone out while he's like brushing his teeth. He's like, "Mom, you left me."
That's if you have a bad writer. Two, not every 12-year-old, 10-year-old has a phone.
An affluent kid in the
but maybe they don't want to give their kids ones, and also too, houses may not have landlines.
They've definitely got an iPad. And you can just iMessage.
Well, here's the thing though,
the internet gets knocked out.
But the parents are
and they don't have.
And the parents, but the parents are on an airplane. And you can't even yourself.
The kid's gonna walk his ass down to Starbucks, connect to Wi-Fi, and then send the mom an iMessage.
He gets hit by a bus, but he gets hit by another
whole
car.
thing. Kevin could have went to more people to say it. He didn't want to. He didn't want to go to anybody though. Yeah. He tried to call his parent, but he didn't want to go. So they couldn't get a hold of him, but he didn't give it. He didn't call the police and say I'm home alone.
It was awesome.
Yeah, he wished for them to be away.
But Deli Games.
He's going to turn off the computer.
The big difference in Deli Games is the dog dies, but then he's trying to protect his grandfather throughout, as opposed to in Home Alone, there was no one being protected.
Yeah.
It was just Kevin protecting his home.
And apparently that was the director's son, right?
Who?
The kid in the movie.
I'm not sure.
I think that article said it was his son, I believe.
But I mean, like, basically Kevin in Home Alone valued material possessions more than his own body. So
it's his home. It is his house.
Yeah.
He could have just went
to my house.
He could have just went to a church or something. He's like, no, these are my belongings. You're not taking my GD play.
Nobody's stealing Buzz's Playboys. Yeah.
You're not taking my
girlfriend. Whoa.
You're not taking my Nintendo, punk. But yeah, so Deadly Games on Shudder. You can check it out. So I guess the order we'll release these in, this will be first, so this is a recent one. So the next episode, we're going to be discussing Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, which we had done the first film like a year or two ago.
There's some good stuff in it.
If you're going to watch part 2, don't rewatch part 1. No. That's all I'll say. But yeah, so that'll be the next episode. And I think they'll take us through all the Christmas episodes.
Yeah. And then we have the year in review and
and all that stuff, because there aren't that many New Year's Eve movies. We did the one because we was it prom or not prom night. Terror Train was the New Year's one, and New Year's Evil. We've done both of those.
New Year's Evil.
Yeah, but yeah. So I don't know. We'll have like year-end wrap-up stuff like that. But yeah. So the next episode will be the next episode will be Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. Yeah. So that'll end our discussion on Deadly Games. And if you want to find anything else, you can go to our website at hbtvs.com. Find links there to all of our social media accounts, to all the stuff we're releasing recently. Because I'm trying to remember, since the recent episodes we recorded back-to-back or whatever, our short film Evil Ahead was in a competition, was a finalist in the top 10 for Film Convert. Did not win. Don't know what it ranked. It was in the top 10. Don't know what it was from like 1 to 10 or 2 to 10. But that's cool. We didn't win, but it was cool to be nominated because that's one where people with big production values and resources are submitting. Production. So our little sub 2-minute short film we shot in literally 30 minutes.
You basically one-man crew. Like I came by, but I didn't need to do it.
Sean just drove by.
Yeah, I was like,
"Screw
you guys.
You got this, William?" And he was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, it was the effects on that one because Chris Shiner done the effects. So the effects are a lot of that one. I mean, we did rehearsals and I worked through it a lot, but it was one of the few times I'm like, okay, we'll only take about 30 minutes to an hour to shoot, and it actually took that. But so you can check that out on the website. I think it's the short film on the website, hbtvs.com. I've submitted the podcast to Spotify, so it should be in there sooner, only more recent episodes. Because I know a lot of people listen to Spotify, so it'll be in Spotify and I think the iHeartRadio app. But it might take up to 2 weeks for all this stuff to show up. So
Let's see.
It's not in there the last time I looked last night.
Okay, yeah, I saw something. I was like wondering when it was going to pop up. I don't see.
Because I submit because our podcast host is Libsyn, and it says it can take up to 2 weeks to show up in the mobile apps and services. So I submitted it. So hopefully it'll be on there sooner than later. But yeah, we'll make a post whenever it's available there because I know a lot of people listen to podcasts via Spotify.
Yeah, I have been. I like that.
Yeah, so just keep an eye out for that. But that'll wrap up this episode of the HBTVS podcast. Thanks for listening.